That's really good. Thank you. So we thought with Asha that it would be good to give you a short session on the European elections, maybe a quick, refresher on the European Parliament itself, what it looks like, what it does, and then really give you all the information about how specifically this applies to the UK, which is not very straightforward, obviously, post-Brexit, but you're here because, you're interested, but probably also because you have communities in your schools of EU citizens. So there's a lot of material information about how EU citizens living in the UK can vote, where and when. So we'll give you all this information. As Asha said, so the different parts in this presentation, it's not going to be very long, but do feel free to ask questions as we go, and Asha will just let me know so that I can really answer as we go. So first, if my screen can change. No, that is not working. So let me try this way.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent. So I know that some of you have been actually in Strasbourg, have seen this hemicycle. Just thought we would start with a picture of the real thing before bothering you with terrible EU jargon. But we thought it was important to remind you that what the Parliament does in the EU institutions in general. So in what we call the institutional triangle, the Commission is the equivalent of the government. The Commission initiates laws, proposes the law. The commissioners work as ministers. They have a portfolio and they propose legislation in their respective area. Then the legislation has to be adopted both by the European Parliament and the European Council as co-legislators. So on the one hand, Parliament discusses the legislation on a political basis, while the Council really is there to represent the interests of the government. I'm not going to bore you with that too long unless you have questions on that. What I think is interesting for you to see is that is the current political composition of the European Parliament following the last European elections in May 2019. So, as you know, we all vote for national political parties. So these names of the political groups probably don't ring a bell, at least to the the citizens, because this is not what they put in the ballot box. So at the end, after the European elections, we'll have probably between 150 and 200 different political parties, but they sort of naturally gather within political groups. The EPP being usually the most important one, that's for the centre-right, traditionally the Christian Democrats, the S&D for Social Democrats, Labour, then in the centre Renew Europe, which used to be the Liberal and Democratic Alliance, renamed after the last elections, but that's where the Lib Dems would have been, and then the Greens. And then on the right side, you have the ECR, which is the group originally created by the Tories when they left the EPP. Sorry. And then further to the right, you have Identity and Democracy. That's the far right, and then the left on the left side, which are the traditional communist parties. So that is sort of the political picture of the European Parliament, and that is what defines everything within the European Parliament. So the chairs of the committees, for instance, the number of vice presidents, but also on a very practical and daily level, the number of files, legislative files that each political group deal with is based on this. So obviously, the bigger the group, the bigger the influence, then the bigger the number of legislation that they can work on, the highest number of high-level positions they can have. Obviously, that is far lower for the smaller groups. You can see 50 MEPs as NI, this grey group. That goes for non-attached members, so MEPs who decide not to be part of a political group. There could be several reasons for this. Sometimes there are very, very small, very niche parties, like the Retired People Party in the Netherlands, or some animal rights parties, or the Pirate Party in Sweden. So if they're elected on a very, very specific manifesto, they might not want to be within a bigger political group with the constraints that it implies, where you have to more or less vote together with your group. Traditionally, it was actually more where the far right would be. But as you can see, the far right managed to create a political group last time. So it is a mixed bag. Sometimes it fluctuates a lot. So some members might leave a political group because of disagreements and be non-attached for a while and then go back. It can seem comfortable to be non-attached because, again, you don't have to follow any rules or guidelines as to how to vote, but it also means that you're on your own. During a normal plenary session in Strasbourg over 4 days, MEPs would vote on dozens and dozens of different topics. It is absolutely impossible for an MEP to follow every single topic and to be aware not only of what the content of the legislation is about, but also about how they would vote, because it's when you're an MEP, you really go into detail about the legislation. So when you're in a political group, everything is organized so that you would be aware, you would be briefed by your colleagues about every single topic. So you can really focus on what you're doing and be aware of everything before you vote on legislation. When you're non-attached, you're completely on your own. So that led to sometimes pretty ironic situation when, again, the far right was sitting there and they would accidentally vote in a very pro-European manner because they were not aware of the detail of a text. Is there any question at this stage? Because that was really like a very short explainer of the European Parliament. Asha, do you think this?
I think that's pretty useful. One question, just mine, is Fidesz currently in the non-attached, the Hungarian ruling party?
That is I don't think so. I think they're still in ECR, actually. Yeah, I will definitely check that, but I think they are still in ECR. Yeah, that is always the issue to keep the group together. The EPP has had some pretty big issues with some of the ruling parties in government. One good example as well was the Five-Star Movement in Italy, the Cinque Stelle, which was created as a pretty flexible movement and joined originally in pretty, extreme right groups, but then actually their members corresponded to very different political identities. So now many of the Cinque Stelle are non-attached, but you can find some of them in the Greens, some of them in the left. Because through that parliament, they actually realized that they adhered to another group more like that's it. Then it's a negotiation for a group to accept a member or not. So, but I will check about Fidesz.
But largely speaking, then when you vote for a political party in your country, they're going to align themselves with a particular political group.
Yes. Yes, that's what you would expect if you vote for a Social Democrat Party. You would expect them to vote, along the same lines. Now, that's where it's interesting, and that's where every member has the freedom and the responsibility of their vote. And obviously, there are national differences within each political group. So no political group expects their members to vote 100% of the time in the same way. It's never happened. So you have to allow some leeway depending on legislation. So to give you a very concrete example, when Parliament is voting on environmental legislation on, for instance, CO2 emission for cars, there's been lots of legislation that's about climate change. You obviously would expect the Greens and most of the Social Democrats to vote in favor of such a legislation. Now, a French member from the northern constituency, which has plants in their constituency producing cars, might have a very hard time voting for such a legislation when they know that it could have an impact on employment and jobs there. So then this member might go to the group and say, look, on this, I have to abstain because this is not what I've been elected on. This is not part of my manifesto. So that is normal to have, you know, this give and take, and that's totally fine. Now, if most of the time you vote in a different direction from your political group, you're probably not in the right group. So that will probably ruffle some feathers. Yeah. This is just to give you a picture of who these members of the European Parliament are. So that is the current legislation, again, coming to an end very, very soon. So we had this time, I mentioned earlier, between 150 and 200 national political parties. As you can see, that's really on the higher end. What was really new this time compared to the previous legislatures is that we had a much higher number of new MEPs. Traditionally, we used to say that it was about 50-50. So, you know, 50% of the MEPs would stay on, and you would have 50% new members. This time it was over 60%. And keep in mind that they came in office, they were elected in May 2019, but they actually really started working in the summer 2019, and COVID happened 6 months afterwards. So you had an intake of members who were largely new to the parliament and to the procedures there, and then they had to work from home and not meet. So it's a very particular intake we've had, and it took a while before Parliament started working a bit more as usual. But in a way, it really modernized a lot the way the Parliament works. So many more online voting is probably more flexible than the Parliament used to be, and I think it's also due to that. We also have, I think, the youngest ever MEP, age 21, and slightly younger. So I think for the last legislature, the average age of MEPs is decreasing more and more. And we had 41% women, which was slightly lower than it was in the previous parliament, when it was 44%. But that's about the average. We're going to talk about the elections now. So for your information, that's part of the rules for the European elections. We'll go back to that. It's organized nationally, so we follow national rules for the European elections, but there are principles, and one of them is gender balance. So the list needs to be gender balanced. Now, each country can decide where. Obviously, we don't interfere with where women are placed on the list, but then there needs to be gender balanced on the lists. On the European elections, I thought I would end on that, because that probably will explain why this matters, which is my next slide. This is the turnout in 2019 per country. Now you'll see there are huge differences between the different countries in terms of participation in the European elections. The ones that you can see with the highest number, basically Belgium and Luxembourg, are the countries with mandatory voting. So usually they are very, very high. And you can see something that will, again, go back to, which is a big geographical divide in terms of relation with elections in general. It probably looks low. It is low in some cases. Like you can see Slovakia at 22.7% participation. This came up from 13% in 2014. So these European elections in 2019 are actually the first one since 1979 where the turnout was on average above 50%. And we had some big increase, largely due to young people vote in countries like Slovakia, which again is very, very low, but to jump from 13% to 22 is no small thing. Okay, Asha has been kicked out of the meeting, so I will proceed. I can't see you, so I hope you're following, but Asha will be back in a in a moment. So I think you're back because I can hear an echo. Good. Any questions on the Parliament as such? Because now we're really moving on to the European elections this year and sort of the campaign to inform and mobilize people to vote. Anything? No, nothing special on the chat?
Nothing in the chat. No,
Okay.
no, just chat. So yeah, let's
Okay.
move on to the voting process.
Yeah. So the reason why we're doing these meetings and these sessions is because there's a need to inform about the European elections. That's very much linked to what I just showed you. We know that the turnout is usually lower for the European elections than for general elections. And it's even more important in the post-Brexit context, because up until 2019, when the UK still voted in the European elections, the UK being a member of the European Union, UK citizens voted. So there was a campaign, there was information, there were posters on the street, there was information coming from your local council, or it was out there. Obviously, this time is very different. Even though we have a big population of EU citizens in the UK, there will not be spots on TV or radio or posters on the wall. So it is very important to inform. But this is something, this campaign that we do, again, across Europe and across the world, really, to make sure that people are aware of the European elections. And I'm showing you this picture of our president, Roberta Metsola, with President Zelensky, because the way we used to communicate about the European elections for many years was much more focused on sort of the benefits of the EU, the practical benefits of the EU, and tell people about what it did very concretely for them in their life. I mean, it's still obviously very important, but we really believe that this time there's a broader narrative, which is also why it is relevant for the UK and for UK citizens. It's really about democracy. It's about the values that we want to stand for. And I think we've seen on an almost daily basis how this should not be taken for granted. And we live in a very volatile world. So that is online. And this is something that definitely could work with both EU and UK audience. Now, specifically about our audience, EU citizens living in the UK. When we started working on informing about the European elections, the first thing we needed to know was, who are they? How do they relate to the EU and to the European elections in the European Parliament? What do they think? What do they care about? Are they likely to vote? And if not, why? So that we could really target the information based on that. So we ran a survey a year ago. We had about 5,000 people responding. So 5,000 people, EU citizens living in the UK, was language-based, that we could target the biggest community living in the UK. And the main takeaways were really, really interesting. We realized that EU citizens living in the UK are on average more interested and more attached to the EU than their counterparts living in the EU. So we have a much higher level of attachment and interest in the EU here. Having said that, it does not translate into voting. So we also have a population which is far less likely to vote in any elections than the people living in their home country. So there's a gap here that we need to fill. What was interesting as well, and you sort of saw that on the table with participation, there's a big divide between older member state and newer member state, where citizens coming from older EU member state tend to be more interested, but also much more likely to vote and much more, in general, interested in politics, whereas EU citizens coming from the most recently joined EU countries tend to be very disengaged from politics and far less likely to vote in the European elections. With the exception of Poland, where you have basically they're much closer to the former member states. So that means that we cannot treat EU citizens as a very homogeneous batch. We need to find different ways to talk to them, to make sure that we spread the information. Now, what is interesting for us as well is why, if they did not vote last time in 2019, why they didn't. And clearly the top two issues was the lack of information about the elections, that they were even taking place, and about where to vote and how to vote, and being abroad. So feeling sort of, not really concerned by this vote, and that it was too complicated, which is true for many citizens. So this gives you that's sort of the summary of how you can vote from the UK if you're an EU citizen living in the UK, and you can see how complicated it is. No two countries have exactly the same rules for voting. So as a French citizen, it's going to be pretty easy for me. I will go to one of the voting stations set up by the embassy, so I can be at this embassy or in the consulates in different cities across the UK, or sometimes in schools or different places. So that is easy. Having said that, I still need to be aware that it's happening and be aware that I have to register for that. So I need to get in touch with the consulate. It's very easy to do electronically, but I need to do this. And we know that most French people, just like, again, citizens from older EU member states, like 60% of them used to vote for British MEPs. So even if they're interested and willing to vote, they might not have realized that it's going to be completely different this time, that they need to do these extra steps and register, contact their embassy or consulate to do this. Now, if you're Italian, you have to fly back. You can't vote from the UK. If you're German, you could do postal vote. So that's pretty easy. Having said that, it doesn't work if you have lived outside of Germany for over 25 years. So yeah, I won't bore you with all the detail. I'm happy to take questions after that, but that's why it's really, really important for us to inform people, especially before the registration deadlines. So for instance, we have 3 coming up very soon on the 25th. It's Austria and the Netherlands, and then I think Greece is coming up on the 30th of April. So we're really trying to do targeted information for these communities. I'm just going to show you an example of how we do that. We have material both for social media, posters, email banners, or leaflets in all official EU languages. So on our platforms, we communicate mostly in English, but we provide all the organizations we know, or all the partners who ask for that, with material in their languages. I just wanted to show you that, because this is where you can get all the information in details about how to vote. So there's a page per nationality where you can find out exactly how to vote if you're based, if you live in your home country, or if you are in a third country. This is also where all the manifestos of the different political parties is going to be put up. So it's not just about the how, it's also about the why. And then there will be also the results will also be published there. Now, if you're interested in spreading the word, if you want to access all this material, together.eu is the place to go. I'll strongly encourage you to sign up to together.eu, because then you will get regular updates and information, and you can see the events that are happening in the UK. But you don't have to sign up for this. You can also just go to together.eu, and all the material, the campaign material that is being produced, is accessible for free. So if you just want to print a poster, download a leaflet, you can do that there. And I think that is it for me.
So 2 questions. One, first from Silke. Are we free to use these templates in our channels?
Absolutely, yes. More than free. You're very welcome, encouraged to do so.
Would you stop sharing your screen? We're kind of getting a feedback.
Sorry.
Thanks. So yeah, those resources are there for you. So a question from me. if schools want to have, say, a poster in Polish because they've got a big Polish community, can we send those out to them, or is it best for them to download those and print them themselves?
You mean the printed version of the?
Yeah, so that poster that you just showed the.
It is much easier for them to print it themselves. But if that is impossible, we can look into that. We have done that for all the consulates, for instance, so that would be across the UK. It's going to take more time. But if there's a need if you're organizing an event, for instance, and you would need some leaflets or just some guidance as well as to what would be the most relevant product, or if you have a big event and you need something, we can look into that. It just takes a few days for us to arrange the shipping of the material. But especially ahead of Europe Day, then we will be sending out lots of material. Do let us know, because then it's going to be easier around the 9th of May.
And so for schools which have a specific group of students that they're trying to target, so for instance the German school or one of the Greek schools, would it be a good idea for them to contact their embassies? Would they have information that they could share, so they can put up posters about deadlines and that kind of stuff from their specific embassy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best thing to go, if it's one specific community, is always to contact the embassy, or rather the consulates, because they are the ones organizing that. And we've been working very closely with them to help spread the word. So most of them are very active and try to spread the word via their community, but there's so much they can do. So if you can help them spread the word about that, that's definitely something helpful. But they might not have material ready, but they will let you know. Then you can contact us if you want to have some visuals or info material.
And I guess thinking about those visuals as well, it's often might be the wider school community, so parents and so on. So making sure that those are put up in places where parents are picking up their students and things like that, not just targeted at students.
Exactly, yes.
So there's a question from Sam. Are there any materials like manifestos for the parties, something suitable for school debates?
There will be, but not yet. The thing is that it's completely in the hands of the parties, obviously. So what is going on now is that each political party at European level has appointed what we call their lead candidates. So now they have one face per political party. So they are working on the manifestos, because the series of debates between these lead candidates are going to start on the 29th of April. Up until the 26th of April, MEPs are still legislators, not campaigners. So the real campaign starts then. But we're hoping as soon as anything is available, it will be on the election website. So if you Google European elections, everything is going to be available there.
There's that elections.europa.eu website.
Yeah.
Once the manifestos are published,
yeah,
they'll be up there.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions at the moment? So we said for the deadlines for registration, the consular pages are very useful. There is the guide on that elections.eu page that breaks it down at what age people can vote in all of the different elections, and what method they use, whether that's postal voting or going to their. So are there any other questions at the moment? And if not, I can see Sam is typing. So maybe one more question from Sam.
And I can maybe mention something else that we've just started today. Actually, it's we will run a social media competition. So based on the posters that I show you, I put it on the poster, we put it on the poster, so you will put it in your agenda. On together.eu, you will find these posters that you're free to download. So the idea is to create a competition where people take pictures of these posters that can be put in any.
The first thing that comes to my mind.
I know. Yes, obviously. Well, you can, feel free. But in a less rude way, we have some really nice suggestions. So we can share that with you if you feel that that's something that you could organize in your school, for instance. Feel free to tag us then, and the winners will get goodies at the end and fame.
So just a technical question from Sam. Will the new president of the Parliament be drawn from the largest party, the largest group? So at the moment, it's from the EPP, which is the largest group. If there's a different largest group, will the president come from that other group?
I love a very nerdy question like that, and I know everybody has different opinions on what the treaty actually means. So the Treaty of Lisbon says that the European, the president of the European Commission, the choice should be based on the results of the European elections. Now, we have proportional representation, as you know. So as you saw, no party has the majority, and it's never happened. So we have the biggest political party, but it doesn't have the majority in the European Parliament. So traditionally, what happened in the last two elections, though, was that the main party was still considered to have to be the main one and to be sort of entitled to having getting this position. But there can be negotiations between political groups that decide that they will work together and actually propose a candidate, a union candidate. So the purist will say that the whole point of the lead candidate debate is to have one face per party, and that the president of the commission should be one of these people. It's not what happened last time, because Manfred Weber was the lead candidate for the EPP, and in the end, it also depends on the member states, because they are the one essentially at the end suggesting the candidates. So they agreed on Ursula von der Leyen. So let's see this time. I mean, last time nobody thought that it would work, that the political parties would appoint someone. It did happen. This time it's happening much earlier than it did before. So let's see how it progresses. But there's room for interpretation in the text.
Sorry, I just actually I was asking specifically about the Parliament, because I just wondered, do they kind of put the face?
Sorry, I misread.
That's fine. I know. I just wondered whether they put the face of a particular person on the groupings in the electoral campaign, and the sort of leading party then selects it, or is it done via sort of a process of selection, like you mentioned, between the parties afterwards? So will Metsola remain?
That's how it should. That's what should happen. But the thing is, it depends very much on the president of the European Commission as well, and the other position, because then all the positions are going to be chosen sort of after the elections between beginning of June and basically when the commission is officially starts. So the whole period of July, September is one of negotiations between the institutions to ensure that you would have not only political balance, but also gender balance and geographical balance. So, I mean, President Metsola is obviously in a good position, being a woman and from a small country, but you can't have only German EPPs or at this position. So then it's really a pretty complex negotiation to make sure that representation matters, so that you don't have only overrepresentation of either gender, country, or political party.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, we don't have any more questions coming up in the chat, so I think we will draw to a close there, unless anybody is desperate to ask something that they haven't yet. Or thank you all very much for your participation, and thank you to Ben for the excellent presentation. And if you do think of any other questions, if there are any resources that you want us to send out to you, please do just drop us an email and we'll get that to you as quickly as possible. So thank you all very much and have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you.